The 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup group stages have wrapped up, and they've been nothing other than shenanigans, chaos, and history. So let's talk about it. Well, this newly expanded 32-nation World Cup has certainly delivered. It has been landscape-changing, history-making, and practically the women's game is not going to be the same in any way, shape, or form after this competition is wrapped up. There was initial concerns when this was announced because we have seen throughout the World Cup massive gaps in scorelines. We've seen batterings, we've seen double-digit goals happen with a clean sheet for the winning team, and this was a valid concern because those 8 spots that were opening from certain continents that have practically maybe had those beatings. And those who were overly critical were even saying that this is a big gamble on the women's game, this is a high risk, high reward, and I guess in their eyes this has definitely been high rewards, but what we have seen is certain nations and teams have finally that stage to perform on. They finally have that opportunity to do what they want to do and show people what they're capable of despite the fights that are going off the field. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But, I mean, we've already seen 3 African nations make it through. You've had the likes of Brazil, Germany, and Canada be knocked out. Canada were CONCACAF finalists. Brazil were coming in as the Copa America champions. Germany were also Euros finalists. So you're seeing big dogs fall, and you're kind of seeing these underdogs in some ways rise now, which was exactly what this World Cup was supposed to shine a light on. But already we can talk about the likes of 3 African nations for the first time ever making it to the round of 16. Morocco's debuting in their World Cup. This is Morocco's first ever World Cup. Now, not only did they go out and grab their first ever win and first ever goal, they went out and grabbed 2 wins, 2 goals, and a spot in the round of 16. I mean, you can't even script a movie like that. And the reason I will probably be focusing very heavily on Morocco throughout this conversation is because Morocco has practically hit every single topic in terms of they invested, they developed, they provided a structure, they built a league, multiple professional leagues even. They've provided the tools and resources for preparation. Like for Morocco, I think that's probably the only current nation from those growing nations or developing nations that has pretty much done exactly what needed to be done. This hasn't happened overnight. In some ways, their rise is a little bit fast in terms of your prediction or the timeline you'd probably put. But this didn't take, a few years or a few star players coming in and, one great coach to put all this together. No. This was a lot of behind the scene work. Their story specifically, too, is not necessarily this new nation that has made it to the World Cup for the first time ever with the likes of Haiti and, South Africa particularly making it through their first ever round of 16. Morocco, in some ways, is a very special and unique nation because it's the first ever MENA region nation to make it to the World Cup. MENA region refers to the Middle East and North Africa. That nation particularly has different barriers to the other nations, and I think in some ways it's quite admirable to see the obstacles that those 3 nations that I just mentioned have to go through. Like the likes of Haiti, they've had a lot of political barriers to go through. For South Africa, there's been a lot of financial problems to go through. For Morocco, there's a lot of cultural and societal barriers and stereotypes to break down, and so those nations haven't had it easy. And I think their representation and their visibility on the big stage, and not only are they just visible on the big stage, but they're beating the big nations. Morocco's game against Colombia, I mean, my God. And what even makes it in some ways a little bit more aspirational, but a little bit even sad at the same time, is a lot of those nations are coming in. There's more nations coming in fighting their federation than nations that are settled in with their federation. Like, would you imagine the game of football or the women's game or this specific World Cup if every nation came in fully supported and fully backed up by their federation? We would be seeing heaven on earth. Because if this is what Jamaica and Nigeria and South Africa are doing without the backing and the full support and their voices being heard by their federation, could you imagine a fully funded team, a fully funded and supported nation by their federation? I mean, it would even be crazier than what we're seeing right now. It does make their story more inspirational, but it also makes it a little bit sad. People should not be going on Twitter and tweeting, pay X, Y, and Z after they grab a win, or pay X, Y, and Z after they put on a great performance. It shouldn't be like that. And I hope by the time we get to the next World Cup, that's not the narrative we're able to advocate for. There's a lot more, obviously, we're advocating for and celebrating and supporting, but that itself shouldn't be happening right now, and certainly not on the biggest stage. This has been said over and over again, and if it's not as clear as broad daylight for you, what we're seeing right now is not a gap of talent. This whole time we haven't been seeing a gap of talent. It's a gap of investment. Solely investment that separated the likes of Germany, for example, to the likes of Morocco, who were both in the same group. And this is not to say Morocco is equal the funding of the German women's national team. Absolutely not. Germany had their own faults on the squad. They had their own issues on the field that they kind of beat themselves to it. So obviously there's more to it that happens on the field, but you need that support off the field to be able to translate success on the pitch. The 32 Expanded Nation World Cup did is it added a little bit extra motivation for these federations and organizers to put a structure in order for them to get their teams to the World Cup, because there's massive financial incentive to this. I'm going to go back to Morocco because they're debuting and they've made it to the round of 16, but the money they're just going to see now when they head into the round of 16 is money that a lot of these players have probably never received before. Similar with the federation, but this is exactly what I mean with the word investment. You put in money and you actually get the rewards back. The federation has invested heavily, and I mean heavily. Morocco has heavily invested. When you look at the numbers and the number of contracts and pays and everything they've offered, it's a lot. But what they're seeing right now is that money is generated back to them. It's definitely not matched just yet, but it's going to take time for that money to come back in and actually start making revenue, and those numbers start climbing. But this is exactly what you need to see. So only a few months after the newly expanded World Cup was announced, that Haiti actually rolled out a few programs with youth academies as well as schools. And so if people want to have that high risk, high reward conversation, it's crucial to understand once that announcement is made, there's motivation to make money. Absolutely, because that's what federations usually are after. But they want to put their nation on the map. They want to put the names of the players for their country on the map. And what better and bigger stage to do it other than the World Cup? And all these wins and success that the teams and all these wins and shocks and even just good performances that the teams are putting are a massive statement to their federation. And in fact, for the federations that are now backing up their teams, this is a massive slap in the face to be like, hey, this is exactly what we're worth, and this is exactly what you should be giving us. And in fact, you should be listening to our voices and giving us the basic resources that we're asking for, because we deserve it. We've got the talent. Just give us the preparation to be able to put that extra gear in to then be able to compete, because these teams can compete. These teams can play. They just need to be given the opportunity to do so. But unfortunately, this has been the ongoing narrative in the women's game for over the last 200 years. Give them the opportunity and they will not disappoint you. Allow them to sell and they will bring in the money. Just give them the opportunity, give them the chance. We also should not be going out here and saying, well, Nigeria isn't backed up by their federation. Why did they make it through instead of Canada, who is also not backed up by their federation? We should not be comparing victims here, because every player and every nation and every team has their own struggles with their own federation. There are so many different contextual pieces and puzzles and players to what the current situation is, because every nation has their own financial struggles and every nation has their own way of handling things, and usually there's governments being involved. So we shouldn't be out here comparing the struggles of Zambia to the likes of South Africa. It's different. Every nation is valid into their own concerns. Comparing who has it worst is not what we should be talking about right now. We should be validating those concerns and pushing for those players to be able to have their voices heard. Zambia is a team that reminds me plenty of Haiti, but their struggles are very different to Haiti. They currently are struggling with leadership and their federation to be able to take accountability, because their head coach, who I'll not be naming, is an accused abuser and sexual assaulter of some of these players, and the federation needs to step up and recognize that. Now, as of today, FIFA has launched an investigation. It should have not taken this long. I don't think Zambia should have even gone into the World Cup with his management in place, regardless of what he has done with the team, regardless of how far he's gotten them. It doesn't matter. But what I'm saying is every nation has their own struggles. And I don't like seeing the narrative of like, they made it, well, they did make it. Germany and Brazil are getting challenged on the pitch now. And I'll even throw Italy into that conversation against those debuting teams. Previously, it was an investment problem. Now, it's still an investment problem, but less of an investment problem, if that makes sense. Because, comparing Germany and Morocco, for example, Morocco got battered 6-0, and I'll happily admit that Germany beat them pretty comfortably. But just taking in consideration how the group ended up looking like, which is Germany and ending up in third and Morocco in second, is that Germany is years and decades and millions of dollars ahead of Morocco, and millions of dollars ahead of the other nations in the few other groups beside them. I'll happily admit, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this, but the game has generally been quite focused and developing in Europe. This is why the Euros is as high of a caliber as it is, which is great. This is where every continental competition should be at. The African Cup for me this year was super, super fun. So was the Asian Cup, by the way. Like, I know we've kind of focused on these African teams, but, we can talk about the Philippines, who also have a very similar story to Morocco in terms of how they've used that diaspora of population that they have, they've gone out and seen, right, where do we have the talent to actually bring in and represent us? Because they represent us, but because they've had their own cultural and, again, political problems, that talent may have been spread away. But putting those plans and hiring those people to actually go out there and collect those players takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of structure work. Philippines have done that very, very well. But the investment gap has gone from this to this between the European and the non-European teams. Right now, you can actually attribute a loss because of the mistakes on the pitch, deployment of the players and positions, and how it ended up playing in the game plan. Now we're able to have those conversations. Usually it's been, well, those players actually have a 9-to-5 job, which a lot of the players still do, unfortunately. But again, that gap keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And this World Cup has proven to us that, oh my God, the women's game has got so much potential still to go, because we're still so behind in some of these federations. There's so many nations that are still doing their own black magic work that could be debuting the next World Cup and could be the ones to make it to the round of 16 before you even know it. The competition is rising. The incentive is massive. Clubs all over the world are able to develop their own local national talent. Professional leagues keep ramping up their investment year by year, and the rewards are clearly showing. What we should keep doing is continue supporting the nations and the players that are not, unfortunately, being backed up their federation, because again, I'm going to say it over and over again, could you imagine what this World Cup would have looked like if all of these teams were fully backed up and supported? Hopefully, we should not be having this conversation anymore in 4 years, but looking at the 2019 to the 2023 World Cup, I mean, it is night and day. It is Jupiter and Earth. I mean, it is so different, and I'm just so delighted and happy to see the point that we've come to. Again, there's still a lot of strides to take. There's still a lot of areas and regions in the world that need to even take that first step. Like, again, this is why Morocco's story is just so good, because they're giving a brilliant tutorial to a lot of federations, but specifically to those around them. If you look at the likes of Egypt or Lebanon, I mean, they're so behind. Some of these teams were collapsed 2-3 years ago. Like Egypt, the amount of times they've collapsed their program is, I can't even count it on one hand. But I hope Egyptian girls in the Egyptian program and the Egyptian Federation can see what Morocco is doing and say, yeah, we want to do the same thing. Similar with the likes of Lebanon. Those nations have their own struggles, different struggles to the other nations. Again, cultural aspects, societal aspects, stereotypes and barriers that are going to take them some time to break down and be able to break into this game. But Morocco's story is a resilient, brave storyline of, yeah, you can do it. You can absolutely have celebrations going on in Casablanca of Egypt. I'm not sure what the equivalent of that is, but something. And also, one last thing that we have heard is the FIFA rankings are absolute bullshit. I will say it as is. It is absolute bull crap. I hope nobody's referring to these FIFA World Cup ratings. I certainly am not, because they are bullshit and they've been proven to be just that. I'd love to hear your opinions on this, how this World Cup group stages have already looked for you so far. Like Philip O'Connor said on my last episode, this round of 16 is going to be an absolute bloodbath. And if you haven't learned anything, don't make predictions, because whatever you predict is going to be the exact opposite of what turns out happening. I've massively enjoyed every single moment that I've seen from the group stages. I can't wait for the round of 16. Can't wait for the quarters, for the semis, the final. It's just so good, and you've got nothing else to do other than sit down, enjoy, and celebrate it. I hope you are doing the same. I'd love to hear your opinions, your thoughts. Please do share them, as always. To stay updated, as I continue enjoying the beautiful game, make sure you subscribe to me here on YouTube and follow me on Twitter. And I will see you later.